Thank you very much. Yay! Thank you very much. Although, I'll be honest, if I knew I was competing with macaroni, there is no way. So thank you very much. I thought I don't want to spend too long on my story because I'd like to spend some more time in like a Q&A and getting to some of the, I guess, the meat of what I hope will be quite a useful conversation that will allow you to actually do some things differently out in the world, and hopefully more impactfully out in the world, which is, I think, a big idea, is that my experience in business is we kind of oscillate between wanting to save a life and make the most of life and kind of live our life in as much of a way where we get to enjoy time with our family and our friends and experiences, but then on the other end of the spectrum we also want to make an impact as well. And to make an impact we need to get up earlier and stay back later and go to that extra networking meeting or that marketing meeting instead of going home and spending time with the family or whatever the case may be. And so the question I've always been wrestling with is, how do you kind of get a bit of the best of both worlds? So you've all got a copy of the Key Person of Influence book. The premise of that book is pretty simple, and it is that the fastest way to kind of create a breakthrough in your business or in your career is to simply be more visible in your industry, to be showing up as that go-to person, that go-to brand. Because there's lots of other things that we can try and work on or fix or do in our business. We can work on our brand, we can work on our website, we can work on our marketing, we can work on our Facebook video funnels, we can launch new websites, we can all this different stuff. We can go networking and we can do all these sorts of things trying to build a business, and yet I'm sure everyone's heard the cliched stats now, like business is hard, it's a struggle, the majority fail, the majority don't succeed, the majority don't have a balance of time, money and fulfillment and all these kind of things. And yet when we talk to them, they're spending all their money on all this stuff, on the marketing and the branding and the websites and all the things I just mentioned, and yet they're not getting the kind of yield out of those investments that they feel like they should be for doing all this stuff. Like we're doing all the right things, it seems, to be building a business, and yet we're not getting the yield out of that business. And so I want to kind of share what we've discovered, having now worked with 3,000 businesses, as to what we believe and can prove really is why. So that's what I want to try and get to in 20 minutes flat. Actually, it won't be as hard as you think, right? And it just depends on how deep we want to go. But instead of me just giving like a 45-minute talk, I want to stop at 20 minutes and literally open it up for chats, because we've got an incredibly, from just the people I've had a chance to talk to, diverse group of business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders in the room. Some are in startup but have like a background of experience a mile long. Others have been in business for 20 plus years running large teams and things of that nature. So it's a really diverse mix. I want to try and make it relevant for everyone with a bit of Q&A. Maybe just a bit of context. Behind the book is a business that we operate in the UK, Singapore, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Tampa, Florida, and we've just launched in Toronto as well. We've got a shade under 50 full-time team members that are spread out all around the world, and they're all on a mission to be able to help our clients make the most of the times that we're in by becoming key people of influence so they can make more of a dent in the universe. We called the company, so the book is called Key Person of Influence. The company is called Dent Global, which was inspired by Steve Jobs' quote, which is the role of every entrepreneur is to make a dent in the universe. And that's kind of that impact end of the spectrum. And yet I never wanted to make a dent in the universe at the expense of being able to live the good life as well. So I want to try and merge those two together. So our business is built around our flagship program, which is a 12-month accelerator. So we work with a group of people about this size, and over 12 months we break it up into 5 key areas. So let's say we're talking about this idea of becoming a key person of influence. Well, how does one do that? Well, what we find is that if you look at influencers, whether you're looking at a Brené Brown or a Simon Sinek or a Mark Boris or a Bernard Saltz or anyone in their industry that's really standing out as that visible, that thought leader in their space, they all tend to do 5 things pretty well. They're great at communicating their value. We call that a pitch. Right? So in our program, we'll spend a couple of months like deep diving into pitch and messaging and getting that value proposition really right. They all share their ideas at scale. You've heard about them because you've watched them on YouTube, you've seen them at a conference, you've read their book or whatever the case may be. They've actually published their thoughts and their experiences in content. They're rarely just selling their time. And so product is the next phase that we go through, which is, because a lot of people are selling time, we go through and package and productize service businesses so they can scale. We try and move people away from charging by the hour, and there are some real important reasons behind that for scalability. And I'm not talking about scaling so you can become like an Uber or something like that. I'm talking scaling so you can have a $1 million lifestyle business if you like. It's very hard to have $1 million lifestyle business if all you have is your time to sell, right? So productizing a skill set's really important. That's the third. Number 4 is profile. Again, you look at a Brené Brown, an amazing profile. She didn't build her profile because she was running around saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. She did some really deep fundamental work and then started talking to people about it, and yet her profile is incredible online, it's incredible in the media, and I promise you it's not an accident. When you actually get in the world of these influencers, it doesn't just happen, it's actually engineered, it's designed on the inside to be able to make the most out of the ideas, the experience that they have. And finally, which it seems to be this room is incredibly good at, is partnerships, joint ventures, alliances, collaborations, working with existing influencers or business leaders in the community. So pitch, publish, product, profile, partnerships. We've found if someone's got a great skill set, like a lot of experience as an executive in a corporate or a career, or they have a business where they've proven the fact that they can deliver value in the world. They're not a newbie, right? Been around the block a few times. But often those people are fairly unknown, they're undervalued compared to what they feel like they should be for their experience. What we find is if you take that core value, that mountain of value we refer to it as, and you spend 12 months focusing on your communication, your pitch, publishing some thought leadership content, building out a product ecosystem, raising your profile and doing partnerships, focusing on those 5 fundamental areas and building out business assets around those areas will do far more for your business, for your brand, for your profitability, for your lifestyle, for all those things, and for making an impact than anything else we've seen businesses do. One of the reasons that we've found for that is, and this is just a straight statement, that until you're a key person of influence in your industry, business is hard. And let me maybe prove a point. Anyone heard of Scott Pape, the Barefoot Investor guy? Everyone's heard of Barefoot Investor, pretty popular book. He's done pretty well, right? So imagine him. Now I want you to just imagine a fairly no-name wealth coach, right? Or a money coach or a money advisor. You know, working in the city, he's got a corner office, he's got a secretary or something like that, and delivers great value to her customers. So the actual ability for her to deliver great value to her customers is exactly the same. He or she, doesn't matter. If that person went and started running Facebook ads, even though they are unknown, and they're doing a Facebook video funnel to try and promote their money course or whatever it is, how do you think those ads would go? Struggle, right? You'd be spending all this money on ads and not getting any kind of return. Whereas if Scott Pape ran some ads about money management, how do you think they'd go? Really popular. So if we just freeze frame there, because people think of that and they go, oh yeah. But the question that's kind of important to ask if you want to have more impact and if you want to enjoy and save a life more is why? Why is it that his ads would go so much better than the no-name person or the invisible person doing the same ads, even though their experience and their ability to deliver value to the customer is the same, and that's the point.
He's the go-to.
Well, he's the go-to person. Profile.
He has a brand.
He has a brand. He has a book and these things. So when we say a profile, let's just think about that, because if I say go out and build a profile, it's kind of like, well, what do you do? It's a fairly nebulous kind of a statement. right? He has a brand. Is that a cause or an effect? Right? So a brand is not necessarily a cause. A brand shows up as an effect of stuff that they've done. Does that make sense? So let's just try and break that apart for another level. One of the phrases that we use a lot with our clients is all stress, frustration, and bottlenecks in your business can be traced back to an asset deficiency. Right? All stress, frustration, and bottlenecks. Not profitable enough, asset deficiency. Not getting enough free time, it's an asset deficiency. Can't attract and retain top talent, asset deficiency. Feeling uncertain about profitability in the next 3 months, there's an asset deficiency somewhere in there. And yet, typically when we're trying to fix our businesses or do better, what do we default to? What do we try and do more of if we're trying to do better business? Sell stuff. Right? We tend to default to sales and marketing. And yet, if you look at any of the biggest corporations in the world, do they have any sales and marketing people on their boards of directors? No. Because their boards of directors are there to do what? Manage and optimize assets. Right? So instead of looking at sales and marketing, you want to look at, well, what sales and marketing assets am I missing? Because if we're not looking to build an asset, and maybe I should define an asset. An asset is anything that continues to create new value, even if you and your team were to disappear. So if you imagine your business without people, without you, without your team, what's left and how much of that is delivering value to people? Does that make sense? Yeah. When you look at that, it's like, oh, okay, so if all of a sudden you're working really hard and nothing happens without you, it is directly pointing to an asset deficiency. If you're not getting enough leads, if you're not making enough sales, if all of your time is going into delivery, if that delivery is chaotic, the moment we understand that there's an asset deficiency in there somewhere, what we find is leaders and influencers, they have a bias towards building business, not doing business. We've all got to-do lists, right? So if you're working on a to-do list, you'll continue to have more to do. So one of the first things we get our clients to do on this journey of becoming more influential in their industry is to add 2 more columns to their to-do list. And if you were to do this straight away, just this alone would change your life. Yes, you've got to have a to-do list. You also want to have a to-build list, right? To identify what is the missing asset and what is the 1 or 2 assets that if you were to develop those assets in the next quarter, would make a big difference. So just quickly, just to make sure this lands, because this is kind of key, what are some examples of what I might mean by an asset? Like let's think of HR, for example. What could be an example of an asset in the HR side of things in your business?
People.
No, we don't consider people assets. People are people, and if you were to ask an accountant where do people go, they don't go on the balance sheet, they go on the P&L. So people are definitely not assets. People are actually inconsistent and unreliable over the long term. We tend to cost money. We can't do it without us. We are also the genius and the inspiration and the magic that makes it all happen. But no, not people. What would be an
customer satisfaction?
A customer satisfaction is an output. You can't build that. A training module.
Yeah.
Perfect, right? So the moment you've got like a clearly documented vision, values, you've got an onboarding document, you've got a 90-day training program, you've actually got a process of putting together like a welcome gift, and you've got a series of checklists that they have to go through to talk to everyone on the team to get to know each other, and if you've got a document for some suggested questions so you know those conversations are going to go well, all of a sudden you've got a much better chance of having a great hiring outcome as opposed to just having someone come into a world of chaos and see what happens, right? So that would be a perfect example of an asset in that category. What would be an example of a marketing asset?
How about like a product? Like a product that you can actually build on, like have one extension.
Is this in a marketing asset?
Yeah.
So an example might be?
So an example might be like, say, Boost Juice, for example,
Yep.
and they go off and do, say, protein balls.
Got it. Yeah, so that's like a loss leader, like come in for a cheap protein ball and you're going to buy a smoothie?
Like
Yeah?
Fries.
Great. What else?
Podcast?
A podcast is a perfect example of a cheap marketing asset, right? Because it's almost no cost to produce. It's got almost infinite distribution, and if people want to listen to it and they fall in love with you and then they want to come and buy your stuff, well, what you haven't had to pay for is like marketing ads or a salesperson. Does that make sense? Who has salespeople in their company at the moment? Can I just have a show of hands? Right? They're not cheap, are they? Right? So they're not cheap. So what would be another example of a sales and marketing asset that you could produce that would help people get to know you, like you, trust you? Podcast? A book? What else? Blogs. Maybe. If the website is yielding a measurable outcome. So if people go to your website and you can measure, well, if this many people come and this many people actually act, then yes, we would consider an asset. Because remember, the asset actually has to do something. So if you think of the apple tree as the asset, the apples are the fruit, the asset has to produce fruit. A lot of people have got websites that don't produce any fruit whatsoever. It's just a thing sitting there that they have. So long as you can measure a yield out of it without you having to be involved, or in the case of the training module, you have to be involved a little bit to get a high yield, you'd call it an asset. So you get the idea, right? The reason I want to make that point is a lot of people feel, oh yes, please?
The podcast, for example, I mean, you are completely involved. If you are no longer there, the podcast is gone.
No, it's not. Podcast is always there.
Yeah, but the old ones, yeah.
Yeah, but so I've been running my podcast for 3 years and people still listen to the very first podcast they ever did and say, wow, that was really great. That's how I found you. See? So
Once you subscribe to the podcast, then it's always going to be there.
it's always going to be there. It's what's called evergreen, right? It's like a book, right? People might still read the book Good to Great or Brene Brown's first book, even though it's like, well, I don't know, 10 years old now, right? So it's less about the age of something, it's more about the quality of something. People still go and watch Simon Sinek's first TED Talk where he talks about start with why, even though it's old now. Does that make sense? All right, so if you were to really build into your language, all stress, frustration, and bottlenecks can be traced back to an asset deficiency. So the big idea that I wanted to, well, a couple ideas that I wanted to try and get across is when someone's looking at trying to become a key person of influence, what do you think is the default that they would try and go and focus on straight away?
Public speaking.
Public speaking? What else?
Advertising.
Advertising? What else?
Success, like track record.
Success, marketing. Like, what we find is people tend to default to their profile. First, they go straight to social media, and there's this idea that I need to be like loud and proud. I need to be this kind of an extroverty person, and I need to be out there. And yet, that often feels a bit weird and awkward. Can anyone relate to that? Like, yeah, that idea of like, what are you doing at the moment? Oh, I'm working on my personal brand. It just sounds a bit iffy. If that makes sense, right? So what we talk about is your personal brand or your profile is just your reputation, right? At scale. So you already have a reputation. So if you want your reputation, if your reputation isn't as far-reaching as you would like it to be, what's missing? An asset. Does that make sense? Right? Now what we also find, as you'll discover in the book, profile comes fourth. Because the world needs more people on Instagram posting junk like it needs a hole in the head, right? So what we try and get people, and most people are posting and it's doing them more harm than good, or at worst it's doing them more harm than good, at best it's just a waste of time. Right? They're just churning out this content that's really not relevant to people, it's not changing the way they think, which is why we start with pitch. Pitch is really important. And there's something, the final thing I wanted to bring up maybe before I open for Q&A is your pitch is very much around getting in someone's head and changing the way they think more than it is just answering the question, what do you do? Right? It's actually got a, like you watch Simon Sinek's video, start with why, and all of a sudden you're thinking of the world differently. You've got a new app in your brain. It's like ding, got that new way of seeing something. And one of the biggest inhibitors that I find inhibits people from really leaning into this idea of becoming more influential in their industry is that it implies you have to be a thought leader. right? And to a degree that is actually true. If you do want to be a key person of influence and stand out in your industry, you do need to be a thought leader. And yet, who here really honestly feels like you'd be very, very confident to get up and say, no, I'm straight up a thought leader in my industry? It's not, is it? Like a few of you? Right? But who would say you don't feel like you're quite there yet? Maybe there's a bit of the imposter monster coming out there. Just give me a little show of hands or some kind of an acknowledgement, right? Typically that's the majority. It's like, it's this, and this isn't women, this is men, this is all of us, right? This is the cross we all bear, is that who am I to be that? Who am I to take that position, to take that stand, to kind of put those ideas out there in a powerful way? And I'm not a thought leader. And then it's often also very easy to go, well, if I'm in marketing, but Seth Godin's already done all the marketing stuff, or Tim Ferriss already has a podcast, or it's easy to find someone else that's very successful in that space and use that as the justification why you're small and not enough and shouldn't do it, etc. So I'd just like to give you maybe another way to look at that idea around thought leadership, because if you're in business, if you're an executive leader or anything along those lines, you are a thought leader, and I'm going to show it to you. Who here has sold something before? We've all sold something, right? You're all in business selling stuff. Who here has had an objection to what you're selling? Someone's gone, nah, can't afford it, not the right time, whatever. And yes, we've all had that. And you've been able to get around that objection, and they've gone, oh, in that case, I'm in. Who's had that happen? Of course you have. Again, you wouldn't be in this room if you hadn't had that. So, and this is important. I would love you to get this. If you get this, this will change your world. How did you get them to change their mind? What happened? What did you do?
Evidence of quality.
Evidence of quality. Says some more evidence. What else?
Build a relationship.
Build a relationship. Understanding their needs better.
My mind thought.
Your mind thought. It's the name of a book. You didn't use physical force, did you? You didn't go around to their house with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch and demand that they signed. You influenced them. You influenced them by what happened?
We got that, Tim.
Yep. You influenced them by sharing what? Thoughts, ideas.
Yeah.
You've just packaged them inefficiently, and that's why it looks like sales. So what if sales, which is changing someone from a no to a yes, it's actually leading them to a different decision through thought. What if that is thought leadership, and the way you're doing it as sales is just terribly packaged? What we find is when we're working with business owners, when we get them to slow down the stuff that they share one-to-one to get people to buy their stuff, the stories, the case studies, the explanations, the metaphors, the trends, the background, all that kind of stuff, and the questions they ask to understand the needs and the diagnostic and all that kind of stuff. When that's just delivered one-to-one, that's sales. But when that's packaged up into books, blogs, webinars, articles, books, podcasts, digital diagnostic tools, and you create a digital ecosystem to help people understand their situation better, which is all you're doing in sales anyway, and giving them some suggestions as to a more efficient pathway to a better result, which is all sales is anyway, but it's also all thought leadership is anyway as well. So the big idea that I decided I wanted to kind of share here was that the fastest way to create a breakthrough in your business, without a doubt, is to be recognized as the go-to person in your industry. The biggest barrier I see in that is people feel like they're not enough of a thought leader, they don't have enough to say. And what I want to say is that you're actually already saying it. You're standing on a mountain of value, and some of the most valuable intellectual property, some of the most valuable ideas you have are the ideas that you're already communicating every single day, every single week to your prospects, which is the thing that turns them into clients. Your salespeople are doing this, you're doing this, your marketing people are doing this, and by packaging that together through some of the ideas in the book, through your pitch, then leveraging that through more published content, then building that out into a digital product ecosystem that can scale so you can attract a lot more people to then have an interest in what you do, because if you have a lot more people that have an interest in what you do, well, that can put your prices up, and all of a sudden we become more efficient than our competitors. And the way that we see that influencers really make their competition irrelevant is not because they have a better product or a better service, but because they've won the thought leadership game. They've been the first person to get inside someone's head where you've gone, oh wow, I really get that, I really appreciate that. You've gone down their rabbit hole. Because if you've spent a few hours in someone's rabbit hole, reading their stuff, doing their thing, you're not going to start shopping around for the competitors, are you? If you like it and it solves your problem, you're going to work with them. And so that's the point. And yet when we get people to reflect on their own business, to what degree have you created a rabbit hole that people can go down to learn all the things that you've learnt to be able to help people? There's usually a bit of a gap there. And so the way you address that gap is to examine and really slow down what are the ideas that you share to get people from a no to a yes, and how can you package that up into stuff people can watch, read, listen and do. So the full gamut of, who's noticed that you've kind of got, some people have gone from reading books to listening to audio. Who's switched to Audible, right? Some. Who still prefers books? The other half, right? So we've got to be producing this content, which means you might do a podcast, but then also turn it into 8 articles, right? So some people are just going to consume it in different ways. But the question you want to ask yourself is, if someone went to Content Gorge in your ecosystem because they had the problem and they were looking to understand it fully, could they consume at least 7 hours worth of content? So if they want to spend a whole day just going deep on this, could they consume 7 hours of your stuff across at least 4 platforms? So YouTube is a platform, email is a platform, podcast is a platform. If you can crack 7 hours across 4 different platforms, across a variety of mechanisms, stuff people can watch, read, listen, do, and it's all based around the ideas that turn people from no to a yes, the transformation you'll experience in your business will be remarkable, but more importantly than that, you'll start showing up as a key person of influence. And so that was how I kind of wanted to, I don't know how long that went for, might have been a bit more than 20 minutes, but that's kind of how I wanted to set the scene. And now what I wanted to do is kind of open up to questions as well. Sorry, was that interesting?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Because the devil's in the detail with this stuff, right? So what kind of questions do you have? Yes, please. And for me and maybe just for everyone else, because you all haven't met everyone else yet, have you? No. So could you introduce who you are and what you do as well, so everyone has some context?
Okay. I'm Jill.
Could I have a water, please?
And I'm founder of a company called CyberSafe Legal, which is a cybersecurity awareness and risk management company for law firms.
Perfect.
So I guess that's pretty specific. I'm really interested in the asset deficiency and how you create assets and what kind of assets there are. You talked about marketing assets. I think you talked about product assets, but I think there's a whole lot of assets.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if you can maybe give us an idea of what are some of the other assets.
So one thing I will suggest do is check out 24assets.com. So we have another diagnostic for more established businesses called 24assets.com. So if you imagine a house has 7 stories, in each of those stories there are 3 rooms. I won't go through all 24 assets, but it starts off with intellectual property assets. It moves, and remember, an asset is something that causes something to occur. So we have IP assets, we have market assets. So a market asset is anything that causes your marketplace, prospects wanting to become clients, to occur. So everything from brand to vision and values to all this collateral and content that we're talking about, market assets. We have systems assets. So you'd have systems assets across every single division of your org chart. So you'll have sales and marketing assets, you'll have operational assets, you'll have delivery assets, you'll have leadership assets, etc. There's a layer of product assets. So just quickly, if you think about product, there are 4 key types of products that we recommend every business needs, that each achieves a different thing. Every business needs a product that is designed to attract attention. Because if you don't have a product to attract attention, all you've got left is your time, and that's not efficient. So it's better to think about, how can I create a product that's very good at getting attention? Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's any of those things that we've talked about. The next thing we need is something that builds trust, right? So, and again, it's product. It can't be your time. Time is an inefficient trust builder. Did anyone kind of feel a bit sad when Robin Williams died? Yeah, and yet how many had met Robin Williams? Right. So content to the point where we felt like we knew him. Who's read a book where you've got to the end of that and you're like, wow, that was really good, and then you meet the author somewhere and it's like, I feel like I know you. Or you've listened to their podcast and it's like, I feel like I know you. You don't. It is an illusion, but this part of our brain that makes friends can't tell the difference. And that's important to know because you can actually leverage trust and relationships digitally through these assets. So products that create attention, products that build trust, products that generate products that generate revenue, and then the final layer of are products that generate profit. Products that generate revenue tend to solve a complete and remarkable solution, and products that generate recurring profit tend to provide ongoing servicing and support. So if you have an ecosystem that attracts attention, builds trust, delivers a remarkable solution, and provides ongoing and servicing and support, you've kind of got the full spectrum of an ecosystem of products. And you'll have assets in each of those categories. But you want at least one in each of those categories, and they all want to stitch together really nicely. On top of product, you would have culture assets. So a culture asset is essentially anything that helps you attract and retain top talent at a discount. A culture asset is anything that will allow you to attract and retain top talent at a discount. So our latest general manager, we poached them from a large real estate agency. She was making more money there than she was now, and yet she works with us because we're on a mission. We support the UN Global Goals. We support causes and charities. It's alive in our business. It's not just something we do at the end of the year. We're purpose-driven. We're mission-based. And she just didn't have that working in a cubicle managing the 50 people that she was before. So it's like, hey, come and manage our 50 people. And away we go, right? So it's just, what are those things that we can do, and how do we mean that's not just my personality, how is that the way it's done? Culture assets, and then finally there would be funding assets. So anything that creates liquidity, essentially, from a funding perspective, whether it's debt or equity or anything along those lines. So for more, not relevant for an early stage business, anything sub 3 million revenue, 24 assets are overkill. And so for the majority of people, I think in this room, the more important 5 assets to focus on would be the assets around pitch, publish, product, profile, partnerships. But for those of you with larger teams or larger organizations, check out 24assets.com. Any other questions?
Glen?
Please.
If you were targeting women specifically, aged between 40 and 60, and you want to get those 7 hours of content out there,
Yep.
which...
This is just taking me back to my 20s. It was just, my whole 20s was spent targeting women. And I thought... Sorry. Ba-bum! So, we're targeting women between an age bracket. Yep.
Yeah, with a certain level of income, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Which...
Facebook. Facebook.
Facebook?
What was the actual question?
Yeah, the question is, which mediums would you target?
Okay, so the first thing you've got to get is these platforms. So it used to be a magazine. So back in the 60s, people used to read magazines or what have you, and used to put an ad in a magazine and that would get the attention. So these social platforms are just the new magazines. It's where people go for their attention. Now, if you're Zuckerberg, what's your number one goal?
More users.
It's not more users. It's not more clients. It's more, how does it all work? It works from attention. Right? So they need to be doing everything they can to get you to spend more time on Facebook. Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, they're all the same. They are in the attention game. What, other than entertainment, what gets and keeps your attention? Is it just content? What kind of content's it got to be? It's got to be good content. Right? It's actually got to be value. Right? So while for your purpose, by far Facebook is the platform, simply because of its advertising capabilities. Like, you can actually break it down by every demographic you just mentioned there, and psychographics and geographics and demographics. Like, you can get that specific. But what people often underdevelop or undervalue is making sure they've got the value to put into this platform first. Because if you put junk on Facebook, Facebook won't let you promote it to people. Can work out pretty quickly, no one likes this, and it will down-regulate it so quickly that you can't push ads to it. It'll just go, no, we're not going to put any money towards this. Whereas if you were to spend 3 months thinking about not Facebook, but by thinking about what is the packages of value, the assets that I'm going to create, the books, the blogs, the podcasts, the whatever, so when I put it into that platform, it very quickly demonstrates that it's of value to Facebook's users, because the moment it does that, Facebook goes, give it to more people. This is getting people's attention. It's keeping people's attention. They're commenting, they're liking, brilliant. Give it to more, give it to more, give it to more. And all of a sudden, A, you get a lot more organic reach, although you don't get much, but you get a much better cost per click, cost per acquisition than you will just running a photo or just running some kind of average piece of content. So I think people really underdevelop the thought process, the real consideration around what is the value that I'm putting on Facebook. You treat Facebook like an advertising platform or like a place to put content that you like whipped up the night before? No. Any of these platforms, if you can spend a good 3 months focusing on creating really well packaged value, these platforms will just open up in a really big way. But another example of that, LinkedIn. Who's feels like their customers are more LinkedIn type of people? Yeah, a few of you, cool. So LinkedIn's full on. If you post something on LinkedIn, if it doesn't get like serious likes or comments in the first 2 hours, it just kills it, like straight away dead. You won't have a LinkedIn post that suddenly pops after 3 days. If you're posting on LinkedIn and you are not revisiting and jumping on and answering every single comment that comes up in that first 2 hours, it doesn't matter if there's 50 comments on it, they'll still kill it. Because they don't just want attention and clickbait, they want conversation and engagement, right? So if you're not scheduling a LinkedIn post and then going back within 2 hours to comment on it, you're wasting your time because the algorithm's just going to kill you anyway. And it doesn't have to be much. It can just be a, hey, thanks for saying so type of a thing, and you'll get 3 or 4 times more reach just doing that. That's how full on they are about serving their goals. So if you think about what does Mark Zuckerberg want? He wants value, he wants eyeballs. How do I create stuff that keeps people's eyeballs for longer? If you can do that, these platforms are insanely good. Yeah, it also helps if you're the key person of influence in your industry. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
So, we've all been here tonight and heard a little bit of your story, because I know there's a lot more content. What would the one thing be, the one take-home be for tonight that we could start being key person of influence tomorrow?
I think the one thing has to start with a mental shift. Being a key person of influence isn't a veneer. It's not like personal branding. It's actually about who you're choosing to be. If you think of any people you really admire, like when I look at key people of influence, there are 3 traits. So the pitch, publish, product, profile, partnerships, that's what you've got to do and build, right? That's the functional stuff. But what key people of influence are being, there's 3 things. They are the evangelists for their company's vision, their company's values, and their company's value proposition. Right? You think of the Simon Sinek's or the Brene Browns, none of them are unclear on their vision. None of them are unclear on who they are being or their team need to be in the service of that vision. And none of them are unclear on the vehicle that is getting them there. So it's kind of like the vision, the values, and the value proposition is like the why, the what, and the how of achieving your goals. And I think there's this dance with fear of, am I enough? Am I worthy enough to stand for that? Am I worthy enough to commit to something that is worthy of me sharing its vision and its values and its value proposition in that way? Which is why most people go, oh, either I'm not enough for that, or I haven't thought that through enough, or if you were to ask 10 business owners, what's your vision? Do you think they could articulate it effectively? Probably not. What are the 3 core values that you hire to and fire to? 9 out of 10 can't do it. What's your value proposition that is unique? Why do people choose to work with you over your competition? And again, trying to get all 3 of those answered is no mean feat. Many people can't do it, and yet influencers can. But it's really about choosing who do you want to be. And we find it's people that choose to spend more time communicating the vision, the values, and the value proposition that drive business value, customer value faster than business owners that are just trying to go out and pitch a product or a service. And so I think it's more of a decision that you've got to make. Has everyone heard this idea, or I know you have, is that you want to work on the business, not in the business?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's this concept in economics called the invisible hand of the market, which says basically money rules everything, right? And everything will flow to where profits or efficiencies are, which basically means if you're not more valuable out of your business, you'll be in your business. Right? If you're more valuable being the general manager, now what could you hire a general manager for? Maybe 100, maybe 150,000. So if you're managing a team, your team, that's a $150,000 role. And if you're stuck in the business doing all that stuff, it's because you haven't come up with something more valuable than 150 grand a year with you doing something else out of your business. So if you're stuck on the tools, the question is, are you making 100 grand or 200 grand or 300 grand or 400 grand? The question is, how do I make more than that being out of the business, doing the fun strategic stuff? And in our experience, the only way to do that is to be the evangelist of the vision, the values, and the value proposition at scale. That is something you can't hire for on Seek. That is something you can't get a virtual assistant to do. It is something that is uniquely available to the person who started the business based on their skill set, their passion, their purpose, their drive. There's just something about the founder or the owner that can kind of pull that off really well, but it's really more about a decision, because the moment you decide, okay, I'm going to commit to standing for something, for being the vision, the values, and the value proposition, once you've committed to the why, the how tends to look after itself. And of course you can read the book and you can do all this stuff, but the fact is that the core ideas I'm talking about aren't new. This isn't a radical concept. It's just making the decision that I believe, the reason we do what we do is I believe that the world needs help. We live in a particular time in history where people are being persecuted, the environment is being persecuted, organizations, governments, countries are profiting at the expense of human and natural resources. And we're at an inflection point where we could either work it all out and it goes really right, or it could go really wrong. Would any of you agree?
Yeah.
2 of you. Far. All right, Sydney. We're very comfortable. So of course, the world needs our help, right? And is it going to be the governments that do it? No. Right, they've had their shot. Is it going to be the big corporates that do it? No, they're too risk averse. Is it going to be the individual protesting on the street necessarily that's going to be able to do it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. They don't have a good track record over time and distance. No. We'll let them bang their pots and pans. No. It's my experience. It's the business owners, it's the influencers that have the creativity, the drive, the resourcefulness, the courage, and the risk tolerance to actually build a vehicle that stands for something that doesn't just serve their customers, but it can also help the world along the way. Every single action that our clients take in our business creates an impact that has an impact with the UN Global Goals and a variety of different charities. So just as a result of working with us, our business does good in the world. I mean, one of our clients here, Danielle. Does anyone know Danielle? Who's had a chance to meet Danielle? Yeah, Danielle? Danielle Chill? Danielle, can we give Danielle a quick round of applause? I'll just give you a quick example. Danielle, can I use you as an example? Yes? So let me use Danielle as a quick example. So when I met Danielle, so Danielle makes incredible hand-knitted jumpers. But she does that in a way that you're not going to believe when you hear the story. When I first met her, she had a store in Double Pay. Was that right, down in Double Bay. The jokes land hard here. Right, and actually, Danielle, do you just want to share that kind of part of the story? Just really quick, because Danielle's gone on this journey of going from having a store in Double Bay selling a knitwear to creating an incredible international social enterprise that employs over how many women now? 200. There you go. 200 women making an incredible dent in the universe by kind of walking through some of these principles. Do you just want to talk about that little transition, because there's also something really cool that we're going to share in a little minute that relates to all of this.
So I started the Dent course maybe 6 years ago. Can you hear me up there? Or do I need to Is it okay?
Yeah, and by the way, less about the Dent course, more your sort of story.
Well, the story revolved around the Dent course, because I remember sitting in the middle of one of the lessons or sessions or whatever you like to call it, and the facilitator says to the group, stand up if you cannot think of how to get $1 million turnover within the next 12 months. And I know the course has changed a lot since then, but on that particular day, I was one of the people that stood up. And after, I don't know, I guess I must have had a capital V for vulnerability written all over my forehead, and the person who was facilitating this course asked me, out of all the people that were standing up, all these questions about finances. And I remember replying, this is really taking me right out of my comfort zone, do you know that? And he said, I can stop. And I said, no, please keep going. And at the end of that day, I actually went to the landlord and decided to break the lease, and I'd moved on, and that's how the change initially occurred.
So what's your business now? Because one of the things we talk about around productizing is how do you take a unit of value and how do you scale it so you can serve more people? Because you are making knitted jumpers, right? What is your business now?
So I'll just fill in a little bridge there that under the Gillard government, the legislation changed in Australia and it became not legal to employ contract workers in the fashion industry. So I had to look for somewhere else to make these jumpers, and very coincidentally that happened at the exact week that I just realised I couldn't produce $1 million turnover. So it was quite a bit of change going on there. And fast forward now, I own a company in India where we go into rural villages and find women who have never been to school, and we employ them and teach them hand knitting, maths and English, and hand knit jumpers for the world's fashion brands.
And we've got a kind of an interesting little, so one of the, just talk about how you actually lift entire communities out of poverty with this business.
So everybody used to think that, you know, oh, that's amazing what you do and all this sort of thing, and I'd be like, oh yes, like it really started to be from being totally selfish, like I needed somewhere to make the jumpers, I needed to earn a living. But over a period of time, I could start to see the flow-on effect that it had in the villages where we were. So 6 years later, it's really clear that anybody who wears or buys one of our products is contributing to changing the economic cycle in these villages, is contributing to these women sending their children to school in these villages. And one of the reasons that I'm here tonight is because up until now, we only sold B2B, business-to-business products. So brands would come and we'd knit for brands and then they'd on-sell it. But it is my mission, before I'm 6 foot under, to employ, I don't know, as many people as I can. My fantasy number is 40,000. Right now we employ 200. and I'd like to double that number within the next 12 months. So in order to do that, we've launched a business to consumer product where you can buy directly. And so we've launched a product that's direct to the consumer, and those beautiful Christmas decoration earrings, I'm not going to be backward and coming forward here, we're selling them to start a new village. So that's what the Christmas decorations are for.
So how does that work? How does selling Christmas hand-woven Christmas ball decorations transform a village?
So if we sell 1,000, we have enough money. So we go into a village and we rent a building, and we have to get a teacher and provide knitting needles and yarn and get the ladies to come, and they take a month to learn to knit before they're off, excuse me, using this coarse word, of commercial value. And so if we sell 1,000 of those, that is enough money, because we are a for-profit business, we're not an NGO. So what makes this special is that in the artisan industries, where, to the best of my knowledge, we're the only place in the whole world that provides a regular income for women in a for-profit situation. So that's, instead of going to the bank and taking out a loan, this is how we're going to get an injection of cash to start the next village. So we're a certified B Corp, and we believe in doing business for good, and that's how we run the business.
Please give Danielle a big round of applause. And Danielle, how can we buy these things?
So they're on our website, put up 2 days ago, especially for tonight. And then the website is in these books, coco.global.
Which stands for?
KOCO stands for Knit One Garment, Change One Life. So one lady makes one jumper. And what I really love, of course it's lovely if you give Christmas decorations to your friends, but if any of you work for a business, I'd really love it if the business bought them and gave them to their staff, and then their staff gave them to their friends.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think the long answer to your question would be the decision to truly make a difference, not just solving your clients' problems, but to commit to a problem far, far bigger than you ever thought you could solve on your own. And the only way to really do that is to become more influential, to become more committed to your vision, your values, and your value proposition.
And is that, do you look at that as about creating content, valuable content, continual valuable content?
So there's 5 key areas that you want to kind of look at working on. But the decision is you want to make a difference, right? And then once you decide you're going to actually make that difference, and you don't necessarily need to be the expert, you may just be the explorer and the guide that's going to make all that happen no matter what. The moment you make that decision, well, then working on your pitch, publishing some content. I mean, the content is one of the 5 steps. If you're just publishing content without a great message, the content's going to suck. If you're just publishing great content but you don't have a product ecosystem that actually solves a problem for people, you know, you're dead in the water. So content's only one layer. I find it's like a combination lock. If you get those pitch, publish, product, profile, and partnerships working together, that's where you'll create the biggest impact in the shortest time. So that's probably all from me. Is that?
Sorry, one more question. Sorry, Jamie, can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
So I'm in the coaching industry. The coaching industry has a language all of its own, and it's all been said before. And the way that people talk about the coaching industry, and maybe this is an excuse. But,
Sure.
How do you stand apart in an industry where?
Great question. Yeah. So first of all, who's in an industry that's highly competitive at the moment? Can I just have a show of hands? Right. Can I have a show of hands? Who's in an industry that's full of Muppets? Can I have a show of hands as well? Okay. So business coaches really isn't any different. Like, we could pick on lawyers. Anyone want to pick on lawyers? Right? Right? Love lawyers? Right. So that's a really good question though, right? The reason business coaches have a bad name, it's like life coaches, is that the reason you get into business coaching is because you can't start a real business, so you're going to go and teach other businesses how to coach. That's the perception out there. Well, that's my point though, but that alone puts you in the top 5% of business coaches out there. The underlying thing about that though, I think, is this underlying idea that everyone's going around looking for this one thing that's going to make them different. And there's not one thing that's going to make them different. Like, you could look at Tony Robbins, for example, and it's not one thing that makes him different. He's got his books and his podcasts and his this and his that and his events, and he's got this whole ecosystem of influence showing up. So if you were to look at a random sample of 10 business coaches, how many of them are authors, speakers, commentators, they're winning awards in their industry, they're active on social media, they're challenging like mindset, or how many are just totally invisible in their industry, going about business coaching in a very traditional 1970s business model sort of approach? Right, it's a tiny fraction that are actually leveraging that. And I promise you, those people are doing really well, because people need business coaches, people need life coaches, but often they're just not leveraging any of the tools and technology that's actually available out there, and they're the plumbers with the leaky taps. I know this because that's what we were doing a decade ago. We weren't coaches, we were marketers. We were marketing all these other people, making them successful, and our business wasn't successful. We're doing revenue, but we had no value to sell. Right? And then all of a sudden we started doing everything that we're doing for all of our clients back onto ourselves: pitch, publish, product, profile, partnerships, and our business started to grow. So I think there's something to be said about going all in. Forget about the stigma of your industry. No one cares. And if someone's looking for a business coach, they're not going to see 20 other business coaches. They're going to see 2 or maybe 3. And if you're the author, the speaker, the commentator that's on a mission, that's serving the global goals, that's doing all this incredible stuff, making a dent in the universe, well, it's very unlikely they're going to pick the other 2.
Sorry, can we just say what the P's were again, please?
The P's?
Can we have it really slowly?
Slowly. So it's in the book. In the table of contents, if that helps, so you don't have to write it down. But it all starts with your word. It all starts with a word is your pitch, your ability to communicate effectively and understand your value proposition. The reason publish is next is because once you've got the understanding of value, we want to scale that so more people can understand your value and the insights. Once more people understand it, well, then we need to actually let them experience it through product, right, to actually solve their problem. And you really only qualify to have a profile if you can actually solve problems for people, which is why profile comes after product and not before. And yet a lot of people are doing it at the very start and they don't have any ability to deliver value for people whatsoever, which is a problem. And then once you've got pitch, publish, product, profile, what that does is those 4 kind of give you the key to the final step, which is partnerships, joint ventures, partnerships and alliances, but not at an entry level. All of a sudden you're able to partner with some of the top brands and some of the top influencers in your industry that you wouldn't have access to but for kind of building the assets in those first 4 categories. So look, I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. Thank you.